Hey, so have you ever heard the phrase, I feel like the universe is conspiring either for or against me? I think I believe the same thing, Justin. And I want to explain how on this episode and a little bit more now on The Move.
Today's episode is brought to you by Logos. Learn more about the world's best Bible study software at logos.com/themove. Today's episode is John chapter 4, verses 1 all the way to the end of the story, which is verse
27.
There you go.
And as always, the question is, have you read it? If you haven't, it's in the description below. We're going to put 10 minutes on the clock, and we are going to begin in 3, 2, 1. So, John is confounding me in certain ways, precisely because, and maybe not so confounding, because I think we're starting to see a rhythm.
Yeah.
But it seems as though he puts these little elements in the stories that are key features, but they're like, how do you?
Yes, and there's this sense like, oh, like I feel like I'm kind of like about to grab onto something really deep, but still can't
it's
quite
just
articulate
out of
what
grasp, right?
Because what we're seeing is we're seeing the progression of stories. The last couple of episodes, John chapter 3 was all about Nicodemus, and we're starting to see these trends. There's this comparison that takes place, and there's also contrasting that takes place.
There's these elements that he brings back. Old Testament, we talked about them earlier. Darkness, light, water, wine, man, all of these things. Old Testament figures just throughout the story. That's right. Something's there.
Yeah, and we see that kind of reoccurring in this passage just as well. There's elements of days and sequencing and numbers and hours. We see that again here. We see a contrast between Nicodemus, a learned and expert, someone who was like a religious figure. Now there's this woman who's a Samaritan, who's kind of like, at least to the Jews' perspective, an outcast. And so we're seeing this kind of thing develop.
And here's the thing. We were actually talking about this, or I introduced this idea off camera, but we were getting ready. And this is what I wanted to ask you, is that it almost seems as these patterns in the book correspond to ways in which my life is sometimes patterned in ways I almost sense, but I'm like, is it?
Are you trying to say that you believe that you live in a fairy tale?
Not only do I believe in a fairy tale, but I am the hero of
of said fairy tale.
No, but like, you know, this line, this idea of like, I feel as though the universe is conspiring for my good.
Sounds like a really terrible rom-com line.
Well, you know how I feel about rom-coms.
Yes, we were talking about that last night, too.
Love them. But it actually feels that way. Like, look at this element.
All right,
John chapter 4. Now, when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed. So Jesus leaves.
It's almost as though like there's a cue. It's like, okay, that happened. Hit my mark. Go to the next thing.
As though that is something that's being revealed to him as he's leaning in to his calling as Messiah, right?
Where you and I might be tempted to see, oh, that's just a thing that happened. Jesus seems to have this kind of deeper insight, this knowledge that there's something more to there's this overarching plan.
Yeah. And so that, and you know, that sentiment like, well, the universe is conspiring. Well, no, the God of the universe has a plan, is actually conspiring, and Jesus is actually on that wavelength because he's full of Holy Spirit, and he recognizes something patterns, and then he moves accordingly.
And literally, he moves accordingly. We were looking this up on our software earlier today, with how Jesus is moving through the territory here. He's leaving Judea and going to Galilee, right?
Yeah.
And you were saying that traditionally, the way that Jews would traditionally go through all the way to Galilee was a particular route. Yeah,
so they would leave Judea, which is on the on the western side of the river of where was John baptizing? The Jordan. Thank you. Yeah. And they would deviate. Samaria is just north of Judea. You can go from Judea, Samaria, right into the Decapolis, which is Galilee. But they wouldn't do that. Why?
What would they do? Well,
they would actually, the reason they wouldn't do that is because they wouldn't want to commingle.
What city was in the middle?
Samaria. The Samaritans were there, right? That whole territory, which...
Specifically a town called...
Sychar.
Exactly,
right?
Which is what we're seeing emerge right here in the text.
They don't want to go there. Go check it out. What Samaritans were actually this commingling between the Jews and the Assyrians, the return of those who had been exiled.
There's a whole history there, but the basic premise is that there's kind of this racism that exists and this kind of religious battle between the two of them. So it's like, we just don't want to be them. There was historical evidence that says that even a Jewish person, a mindful Jewish person, wouldn't even share a dish that a Samaritan had eaten on previously.
That's right,
Like,
right.
That's how thick this thing
Yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah.
If you think about American slavery, you
Yeah.
know, just even like separate water fountains,
Yeah,
it's kind of like that. It's like, oh, we don't want to
We don't
mix with
mingle.
them.
We don't mingle.
So instead of going straight through the most optimal route, which would lead them through Samaria, what would they do instead?
They would circumnavigate it and extend their trip and actually maybe incur hardship, but do that to not mingle. But Jesus seems like he gets a cue.
Time to go.
And what's interesting he leaves the religious leaders know something, and maybe they're going to approach, or there's some sort of relationship, and he actually turns from them and heads up to Samaria, right? And as he heads there, he actually encounters this woman, and he encounters this woman at a well.
So one of the questions I'm thinking about as like I'm reflecting this, looking at the map, seeing the trends here, is like, why would Jesus do something so contrary? Maybe it's simply because, you know, he just doesn't care for the religious rules. We've seen this theme of getting rid of the traditions and histories, or at least giving them more fulfillment and showing them the true meaning of these things. And maybe the Jews at some point had thought that there was supposed to be such a separation between them and others because they were the chosen people.
Yeah.
Maybe Jesus saying, oh, that's not the reason, or that's not the way you live that out. That's not what I really meant by that.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's something deeper.
I actually think that John gives us a clue of what's going on when he goes up to John the Baptist.
Okay.
And we don't have it here in John, but we know that when he came up to John the Baptist, it was
He's like, no, I can't baptize you.
But he says, no, you must baptize me
To fulfill.
all righteousness.
Right.
And what John is telling us is that he's positioning Jesus as the fulfillment of so many things. Prophetically, excuse me. I had some delicious lunch. So he's positioning himself as the fulfillment. And as he almost hovers with the Spirit and walks with the Spirit, he's fulfilling all righteousness. So again, walks up, ends up in Samaria, sits down at the well, woman comes up, they have an exchange, right? And one of the things he highlights is, first, he asks her for a drink.
Which, again, scandalous given the whole context. Like, why would you ask me? You're a Jew. I'm a Samaritan.
Yeah, and a woman.
And a woman.
Right? You're going to ask me for a drink. And he's like, yeah, well, woman, if you knew
what I had to offer, or who I was.
Yeah, who
right?
I was and what I had to offer, you would have asked me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, okay. Well,
hey, I'm thirsty.
Yeah,
I don't want to have to do all the hard work of getting all this water out of the well.
But first, what does she say? She said, oh, are you greater than our Father?
Do you hear the tone in the question?
Are you greater? Right?
When I hear that, I hear kind of like a cheeky, sarcastic
Yeah.
tone.
Oh,
like,
no.
like,
Really?
oh, really?
Oh,
you're so
greater.
great.
Yeah.
You got water that I don't have. Like, okay, so come and give it because clearly you're better than my father. And like the whole tone is just like, no, not really.
And what's fascinating is that the story of John thus far has been, they're like, no, actually, he is greater.
Actually, he is pretty dope. Did you hear about what he did over there?
Yeah,
Did you hear what he's doing over here?
Yeah.
Just you wait.
And now what's interesting is that the woman, it's almost as though the universe, God, is conspiring to reveal something to her.
Here's this beautiful love story.
And will she lean in, right, into what's being offered and presented? I'm actually here with a friend of mine. We're doing some work behind the scenes. And we were talking earlier today, and this is a line that you gave me,
All right, tell me.
some time ago. Remember when you were like, you know what happens, Jonathan? Scared money don't make money.
I
Right?
did say that once or twice.
And then I started from there, that things have changed for us. And I'm like, man, let's just risk it. Let's just go after things. Why not?
Yeah.
Right? Like, let's just lean in, particularly since we're in this ministry deal.
Yeah.
Right? Let's lean in hard. And it's been amazing thus
been
far,
great.
from where we were to what things are happening
And
now.
what we see as we're willing to move forward is that somehow magically things begin to kind of coalesce and come together almost by accident.
Yeah, and a friend of ours, where he talks about, man, Jesus is magic, right? Because like the things come together.
Yeah.
But the opportunities present themselves, things that present themselves, and you got to be willing to step in. And here's how you step in. There's this stepping in when you know who you are and who he is in you and who you are in light of him, that you're like, you know what? I see this opportunity. I'm just going to lean in and go for it, because it almost feels like the universe is conspiring for my good. But we know it's the God of the universe.
God actually has plans for us. He has a purpose for us. And if that's the case, then there can't really be an accident or something that catches him off guard. So one of the questions I remember being asked by a mentor is, what would you do if you knew you wouldn't fail?
Yeah.
right? It's this idea that, man, God is with you. Who can be against us, right?
Yeah.
So lean in and follow the leading of the Spirit.
Yeah, and it seems as though the way John is telling the story is that Jesus lives this way. He's given, I genuinely sense that this is what John is doing, that he's given us all these clues for us to come to the conclusion. And it's almost as though the way John is writing it, that he's giving the opportunity for us to be like, I think this is what the Bible is doing. And to lean in the same way that Jesus has leaned in and is inviting this woman to lean in. And it's all around him, his story, him as Messiah, giving living water, all of these elements.
And I think that the way that Jesus has this, and this is kind of what we touched at the very beginning, it's the way that he's able to make this delineation as to what to do, where to follow, what to do in life is because of his connection with Father.
Oh, there it is. This one's a good one.
It's a good
one.
one.
This was a good one.
We have to do a part 2.
Yeah, let's
Stick
go
around.
back.
We'll see you tomorrow for the part 2.
All right, in the next 10.
Hey movers, I recently got to travel to the Logos headquarters and ended up recording several tutorials on how you and I can get more from our Bible study using Logos. To see the entire playlist of videos, visit logos.com/themove and get 10% off any Logos 8 product you want. logos.com/themove.